We were real nervous and real jumpy all day, kind of calling neighbors, just saying, be ready, be aware, be firewise, know what's coming.
So a lot of that tight-knit community communication had already started. People making phone calls, asking questions, seeing what you know, what you don't know, what you're hearing, what you're not hearing, and that's when we pretty much told everyone, get your important things together, make sure you've got your animals, you got tabs on them, because we don't know what's happening, but we could have to pull the trigger here any second, and it ended up happening.
Yeah, everybody was pretty on edge, but when it came down to the evacuation, it was fast and furious. It was get out now, it was leave, drive as fast as you can, and go down canyon. So it was just a matter of knocking on doors. We went around with the ambulance with the loudspeaker announcing, you need to evacuate now, the fire's in Poudre Park. So a lot of that, the very first hour of evacuation, and then it was just game on firefighting from there. Initial night of the fire, it was 100% structure protection once we got everybody evacuated. And it was pretty obvious which structures were next on the list to be protected. So we actually were able to save every home that we got to that night, and that was a pretty magnificent feat.
We were pretty much on our own for that first night, which is totally atypical, because everyone was over in Poudre Canyon helping them out. And then as the more resources were arriving from around the state and around the country, they started relieving the crews that were working from the whole day before.
Yeah, but then with the Type 1 team, they allowed our local resources to be a part of the incident. So we got to work on a crew every day after the fire began. What
happened with us here is the first thing that they did is they utilized our local knowledge. They wanted to know what the target hazards are, what is high priority, low priority, what's a vacation rental, what's a primary home, and stuff like that. So that was one of the first things that we did when we tied in with the strike team. And then they tied our team into doing structure protection. There was no reason to utilize resources to stop a hill that has no homes on it from burning. Yeah. And in fact, it was beneficial to allow it to burn to the road or the river, because that would create a defined boundary of the fire. So as far as I know, the only activity that happened in the canyon was structure protection, which was easy. Well, not easy at all. But what we would do is as the fire was moving laterally up the highway, we would have a team of firefighters that would, a lot of our homes up here are in clusters. There'd be like 4 or 5 cabins in a row. So we would just dig fire line behind all 5 homes, if there was a cluster of 5 homes, and put hose on the ground, charged hose lines, and sit there and babysit that fire line, watching the fire advance down the hill. And then when it would get to the fire line, we would, what we call blacken it, or make it wet, and we would make 10, 15 feet all the way around the fire line, totally soaked with water. We're convinced it's not going to move anywhere. We'd bump up to the next group of homes.
I don't know that anybody was prepared for that kind of fire. That fire was a fire of a lifetime, in my opinion, for me especially. We've worked very hard over the last 10 years to be a better prepared fire department in terms of improving our equipment through grant writing, and in terms of improving our training and outreach to gain more members on the department. We've worked very hard at that, and I think that gave us the best shot at fighting that High Park fire. We have more knowledge this time around. It's hard to say if we would do any better or different, because fire is its own beast and you don't know what it's going to do. But I have more knowledge than I did before the High Park fire, and I think all of us as volunteers do.
Being both trained in wildland firefighting and having lots of training so that when it comes time to have to act, we just immediately jumped into action without having to think.
Right.
It gave us the power to be able to stay and not have to evacuate, and the power to be able to do something about controlling somewhat the outcome of what we had in front of us.
And living in this community, being a part of it, we're aware of who lives where, what sort of situation might they be up against. Did so-and-so get out of bed? Was so-and-so able to get a ride because they can't drive because they had a stroke? Where are the houses at that are still standing that we need to go approach next? So having that sense of community lent a good deal of knowledge to the firefight. I think that gave us an edge on a very limited situation that we had, but knowing where those houses were and who lived there and what their circumstances were was very, very helpful.
We had a pretty good community wildfire protection program already in place, and we had a lot of people who had, over the last you know, 10, 15 years been doing a lot to make their homes more fire-wise. Some of the homes that we lost in the first hour of the Poudre Park chapter of the High Park fire are some of the ones that were less fire-wise and less defensible, and some of those folks aren't rebuilding. And a lot of it, like for example, Kings Canyon, which is Boyd Gulch, a lot of it, what made it those homes indefensible is the road itself is a danger and a hard road to get in and out of. So we couldn't commit fire engines to up there. You can just hike in, help mitigate a home as quickly as you can with the very little time that you have. And when the fire ripped through that particular gulch, it did so with a vengeance and some high heat. Being the training officer of the canyon, one of the things that I stress ad nauseum at all of our trainings is we don't risk our lives for property. There's no reason for it.
Right.
We'll risk our lives in a highly calculated manner to save a savable life. We might risk a little to save a property, might being the operative word there, and we won't risk our lives at all for anything that's not savable, whether it's a life or a property. And we trained to that. The night the High Park fire happened, were we in harm's way? Absolutely. But we had very clear escape routes. You know, even before the fire slopped over into the Poudre Canyon, we pre-positioned 2 fire pumps. We put one over here at Falls Gulch, under the road. We put the pump at the river, and there's a culvert there. We were able to stretch a hose under the road, and because of the Hewlett Gulch fire that happened exactly a week before the High Park fire, we ended up buying a fire pump personally, and took delivery of it the day before High Park fire happened.
Yeah.
And we're able to get it up and operational. So we actually had 2 water sources on either side of Poudre Park, and that just speaks to the firefighter training and preparedness that led us to be able to stand and make a fight, because then we had 2 water sources on either side of Poudre Park that were running continuously, and it was one of those things that without that we may not have had the ability to stand and fight. The strike team came in, and we realized that, okay, the Poudre Park is no longer in immediate danger. It was just like, whew, oh, that pump really came in handy.
Yeah.
Then I was wishing I spent the extra couple $100 on the bigger one, but it worked.
High five now.